Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching the lab setup video for the Active Directory Server 2003 course. The goal of this video is to get you comfortable with the lab environment that we're going to be showcasing and going throughout these different videos. Now, let's first take a look at the overall network diagram to get you a better feel for what's going on. So we're going to be operating with a simple 3-computer network here. So all these are just plugged into a local switch is what we're using here. We've got 2 servers. Both these servers are running Server 2003, and we have one machine that's running Windows XP. Now, the Server 2003 machines, they are running evaluation copies of Server 2003, so these will work properly if you're running evaluation copies in your lab environment as well. If we look down here, Server 1, when we first set this up, we just have an IP address very similar to what the Windows 2000 structure was like. The IP address here is 192.168.1.201 with a 24-bit subnet mask, or 255.255.255.0. The default gateway, now this is a specific setting to what we're using, okay? So this is not something that you're going to have necessarily, okay? Pay attention to this. Now, if you don't have a default gateway setting, that's perfectly acceptable and your lab will work. The only thing that you won't be able to do is then connect outbound through your router or your internet gateway out to the internet. Okay, and that's what we're showcasing here. We actually have a computer acting as our router. We're running Microsoft ISA Server Firewall, and people are coming outbound through here and then getting out to the internet on our test lab. And you can see here the internal NIC of the ISA Server Firewall is 192.168.1.254, and that's then why we're using the default gateway settings here and then also up here on all of our internal machines. Okay, so this is really not a focal point of our lab, so we didn't bother to go through the configurations of the ISA server. So we just left it as a general looking router, and that's all we really need to worry about right now because we'll be focusing on our 3 computers here. Now, Server 1 has a preferred DNS server that's pointing to itself. Okay, now initially we're not going to see this setting. You'll see here in a second. We're going to walk through all of these, but after we have this domain environment set up, that is what we're going to want to have configured. Okay, so and the reason for this is because Server 1 is going to be a domain controller and also functioning as a DNS server on this network. And when we're dealing with local DNS, this machine should be pointing to itself for name resolution. Server 11 is going to have an IP address of 192.168.1.20, should actually be 211. You could ignore that. Okay, 192.168.1.211 with a 24-bit subnet mask. Default gateway is the same. Preferred DNS servers pointing over here. And this machine will also be a domain controller. That'll be handled after Lab 1. You'll get a feel for that as we're actually going through that. And then, of course, we have a desktop machine. And this could be a desktop, a laptop, any machine that you want to use, really. We've got it named XP1 in this particular lab. The IP address, 192.168.1.1. Same 24-bit subnet mask is required. And then we've got our gateway and preferred DNS server settings, just like we had before. Okay, so it should be fairly straightforward. Okay, this is a logical network diagram. If we were to draw out the physical diagram, all that we would really have here is a hub or a switch. Okay, and all these machines would be plugged in directly into this hub or switch here if you're a little bit confused by that. Even my internet gateway here, I told you before it was a Microsoft ISA server, so we draw a server here. It's just plugged in here as well to this hub or switch, connecting all these devices then to this one internal hub. On the outbound side, this would be plugged into whatever's providing my internet, whether it's a DSL router, cable modem, or a T1 connection as we're using here. Okay, let's go take a look then at the individual configurations on each of these machines to give you a better feel for exactly what we're running here. All right, first we're sitting here on our local base system, and this is a system running Windows XP. We do have this little utility here that's provided us with all the information local here. So if you're ever confused, wondering where we're at, you can kind of glance down here to get a feel for the computer name, okay, XP1, what version of operating system we're running, and then that same IP address information we were talking about before. Now, a couple other things we should look at. Let's go take a look at how this is configured and make sure that we're comfortable with what we see. So I'm going to the network card here, and you notice we do have two network cards. One of these is disabled. That's fine. If you have two network cards in a system, you will want to disable one unless you're using the other one, but most likely you would not be. Right click, go to Properties. This brings up my TCP/IP settings here. And then here you see all of these match except for my DNS server setting right now. Okay, if you look at this right now, it's set at 207.69.188.187. This actually right now is connecting this computer out to the internet. So if I were to open up Internet Explorer right now, the internet still should be functioning. Okay, so we see that I can get out to the internet. However, if I change this to our setting that we spoke of before, and that's pointing it to the preferred DNS server on our network, 192.168.1.201, I'm now going to be looking to this machine for all of my DNS name resolutions. Okay, so I'm going to click OK here a couple times. And what I want to point out to you is now when we attempt to go out and access the internet, we're going to wait for this to finish here. I'm no longer able to get out to the internet. And I think this really messes people up because, you know, you had the internet working a second ago, you just changed that setting and now it's not working. So you start second guessing what you thought was supposed to be the right way. Well, here to tell you now, just make sure that you're comfortable with this, but anytime we're configuring Active Directory here on a local domain, your machine should always point to your local DNS server. Okay, what needs to be done, we need to add an extra configuration down here in our DNS server that will connect all these machines out to the internet. Okay, so what I can tell you is hold off here for a second. We'll show that in the next video when we're going through and configuring DNS. I'll show you how to set that up and configure it. What I want to get across to you though is just make sure that anytime you're setting this up in a domain environment, okay, so you've got a domain controller locally on your network, this machine should be pointing to that domain controller. Okay? If you're in a home environment, there's no domain controller, no domain at all, well then this would be pointing out to your ISP as you saw a second ago. Alright, that's all we really have to do on this machine. It's fairly straightforward, not a ton more to do here. We don't have any domain environment set up at this time because we'll be doing that as part of the process of Lab 1. What we will do though is connect over to our other two servers, and we're going to be using remote desktop connection. If you haven't already and you're not familiar with remote desktop connection, make sure you take a look at the video that's included on the CD. It shows you how remote desktop connection is set up and how it's utilized. Okay, we're just going to be using it to connect over to other servers on the network. I've got two other servers, server 1 and server 11 as we showed before. We're going to connect over to server 1 first, and you can use a NetBIOS name as I have here, or you can use an IP address. Either one will work fine. Okay, so we've connected over here to server 1, and what we really want to do is just show you exactly how it's configured. What I've done to this system outside of the default installation that we saw before. Okay, first things first, I'm going to go up here to My Network Places and show you the IP configuration information. I'm going to right click here, go to Properties. Okay, and you see this machine's been configured with the IP address of 192.168.1.201 as we set out before. Subnet mask, 24 bits. Default gateway, it's pointing out through our default gateway here. This will be different for you if you have it set up differently. And then the preferred DNS server that we were just talking about. This worked to connect it out to the internet, which was great for activating this server. You know, when you install Server 2003, it must be activated, so I had to do this initially because we haven't installed DNS yet. In the next video, however, we will be installing DNS, so we're going to get our network set up. And to do that, this machine is going to be pointing to itself. This will be the one and only DNS server on our test network, so this machine will be pointing to itself for any DNS name resolution. Just click OK here a couple times. Okay, and now we have our new TCP/IP settings. I don't know where our network card disappeared to there for a second. Okay, and then the next thing is to go take a look at the computer name. Now, this is normally called My Computer here, and I renamed it just so it was easier to identify this machine. Okay, this is now server 1. If I right-click here and go to Properties, I will see the location where I can rename the actual computer name. Okay, here we've got the NetBIOS computer name server 1. Okay, and you see that it's not part of any domain right now. It's just in a general work group. So that's what we have here. This is server 1. We've already renamed this machine and rebooted it. And that's how it ended up with its name, server 1. Last thing we need to show you on this machine is the remote desktop connection. We have enabled this just by checking this box. This machine's now capable of being connected to remotely over the internet, over the network, not the internet. Okay, so we can log off here. Okay, and then we're going to go over to our third machine, and that's server 11. Okay, and server 11, just like the last server, is running server 2003 Enterprise Edition. It's an evaluation copy. Okay, and we'll go on to My Network Places, just like we did a second ago, and we'll take a look at the IP information. Okay, this system, as we showed before, is configured as 192.168.1.211, 24-bit mask, same gateway, same DNS server address that connected us out to the internet. Well, this has to change. Okay, and notice it's not pointing to itself because this particular machine is not running DNS. Okay, so all DNS name resolution has to go through server 1, which is located at 1.201 as we've got mentioned here. Okay, so that's it there. And then we'll go check out here, same thing, we renamed my computer to server 11. And if we go to properties and computer name, we see that the full computer name has been changed to server 11, so that matches up. And we have enabled remote desktop connection here as well. Okay, and we pretty much knew that was already checked because that's how we just connected to this machine, is using a remote desktop connection. Okay, so this machine's pretty well set up too. Last thing we'll do, let's go back over to our XP machine. And from here, we're going to test connectivity. Okay, so we're going to ping these other machines. Always a good idea before we get too far into our lab to make sure that we've got connectivity with all of our different machines. And you can see we do get replies from server 1 located out at 201. And then here's server 11 located out at 211. Okay, so no problems whatsoever. Network connectivity looks good. Should not have any issues. Okay, short and sweet. That wraps up our lab setup video. We're now ready to get into lab 1 and start building our Active Directory in server 2003.